Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.
In this game you play as the opposite of the Highlander, someone who decapitated vampires because that was the only way they would die. Here you play someone who decapitates themselves, and it doesn't make you die so much that it's the central game mechanic. You just play as a rocket-propelled head inside a life support helmet, and you land on other decapitated bodies to take over them. I wonder what came first, the idea for this game or the pun? Welcome to the 1970s inspired future, where humanity has, for undisclosed reasons, ditched their meat bags to become one with the singularity and be a bunch of immortal robots who don't need to eat or sleep, just engage in the excesses of the 70s. Kaleidoscopes, astrology.
You're Pisces ascending, aren't you?
Lava lamp goo, crystals, shag carpet, and the, now that I think about it, surprisingly 70s concept of chess. You are the last traditional human, well, the closest thing they've got, and you have to deal with the baddie Methuselah, who seems tied to your awakening, and is also seemingly in charge of this robot resort. The game is a Metroidvania, but a rather different example of the genre, the main difference being that movement mechanics aren't the focal point of the game. It doesn't even have a jump button. Your head, once detached, as said, can fly anywhere you want it to, and usually anytime you're blocked from, say, a secret, the power required to proceed is just a short ways away, at most. So the game mostly lacks the almost trademark backtracking of Metroidvanias. It's pretty straightforward, and those secrets are never hard to find. At its hardest, maybe some energy that you use to buy upgrades will be hidden in the rafters. Instead, the focus is more on combat and using your head landing power. As small as your head is, there was enough room to install a vacuum, it seems, with enough power to suck the heads of some robot denizens. And then, when they're open, land and use their powers, such as lasers, like Kirby, but not as bonkers. Nowhere near as many bodies to take over, and thus nowhere near as much variety. Not as cute and not as weird, but they have included their own trump card. You can also use their dance moves. And rather pleasantly, you can be an elevator. Sure, it's a slow faff, but it's an amusingly benign use of a superpower. Otherwise, get to grips with the color-coded nature of their security force.
Here you are again, out of the blue. Access denied. Orange, you sad?
To get the kind of fire you like, and then use them to pop some tops. Aiming with a controller was a bit finicky, but it was fun. Conventional wisdom would state that the robots with more beams are stronger, but sometimes that just resulted in sensory overload, rather than increased firepower. Light refraction is messier than Pink Floyd advertised, isn't it? You can use cover too, as well as the skills I mentioned you can purchase from the skill tree to help in combat. But the weirder, more active use ones are fairly late game, and by that point you've probably noticed that the direct approach and being a homing vacuum can be a whole lot simpler in a great deal of combat scenarios, and you may be a bit reticent to use extra inputs by this point instead of your go-tos. In feel, this game is solid as a rock. Thudding. It's not as flowing or fast as the average Metroidvania, and in spite of the on-demand flight, you're not as mobile, and in my opinion that's enough to establish it as unique, and it tends to handle 3D graphics better than others in the genre because of it. Doesn't feel as loose or flimsy. Sure, fewer moving parts, but it's fit for purpose. It's also a beautiful looking game that can give you some impressive vistas, as well as interesting camera angles, backgrounds that inject beauty even though it's a coliseum, and the 70s design is great too, and architecturally it's very curvy, bulbous pods. Sure, it can boast some generic sci-fi, but once again, that may be a 70s thing too. Plus it's pretty, with loungy living spaces. The color palette has a drained quality, reminiscent of beige, once again because of the decade.
Why your eggshell? I can't decide.
But it also has some areas that are quite warm and areas that are quite cold. Also has a soft quality, as though filmed through an old camera. And then you get some orange to purple injecting some neon. Looks nice, although it doesn't necessarily stand up to the test when you actually look up close, but usually they don't make you do that. Musically, it's decent. A lot of times it's more generic sci-fi kind of stuff. Atmospheric, can add to the beauty of those visuals, with a feeling of awe. Other times, some more general tension music. But at times they go a bit more fun with decade appropriate stuff, especially during the dances. But it's rare where those two approaches combine, which is perhaps a shame when you listen to this track. And the voice acting is pretty good too. Sure, the robotification of their voices isn't always so complete.
You cannot hide on this field.
Doesn't make emotion that surprising. It's more like the voice actor gets distorted, maybe even made scratchy and a bit piercing through some kind of modulation, or maybe talking from inside some kind of bowl. But I still appreciate it, how they squeezed emotions out of them. Really made them feel like robots, and then really made those robots feel like people.
Even at the best of times, death is better.
Please do something.
More like the stupid lot. Am I right?
Plus, in all fairness, the lines can be funny, or at least charming. I even warmed up to the cliché high talk.
I'm gonna crash land on Uranus.
Plus, Invader Zim makes an appearance as a giant tablet on wheels.
Happy sees you are determined. Would you like to know more about obsession?
You can't deny that this world is quirky, fun, and I'd say it's cool too. But apart from that loveliness, story-wise, it's okay. Common in a lot of ways. An amnesiac wakes up in the future to figure it out and save it. Fairly predictable, but it does have two satisfying moments, and they peak above the average. As said, the residents can be surprisingly relatable, and sometimes funny, but in an optional dialogue kind of way, and it does more for emotional heft than the main story. Arguably, most of the thrill of the game comes from the style, because of that story, and its general straightforward gameplay. You play as a pretty shonen head. It's not the longest Metroidvania, but aligns with the playtime of those on the shorter end at 11 hours. And I discovered most rooms, got most of the health, energy and thrust upgrade rooms, except for one, so in that time I had gleaned most of what the game had to offer. But don't worry, the game is cheap on Steam. 219 Rand full price, 21 Rand 90 on sale, which is about 2 Rand per hour of gameplay. It's not the best, but it's ultimately cheap enough to recommend without issue. And it doesn't have the smallest download size, but I suppose it's more in the okay realm, as it takes up 3.55 gigabytes on the hard drive. I've definitely seen better, especially for such a short playtime. It does technically work on the Warhorse, but it lags atrociously. It's pretty much not playable in this state. When I turned the resolution down to 800 by 600 with the lowest graphical setting, it did get better, but there was still frame rate drop. Old me may have played this way, but a great deal of you won't. So here are the system requirements. You make the call. Stereotypically though, I'd say it's mostly kid friendly. At worst, maybe you see a dead body once. Maybe. And there's a place called the Fondalarium. Some fairly mild swearing, I think, too. And some people won't like this one. Starts with the walk like an Egyptian, although some may find that using that as the determining factor is a bit harsh. Other than that, I don't know if the rest of these moves are used in Egyptian dance, commonly. Arguably they don't have to be. The thought just occurs to me because there are other dances whose theme isn't just 70s, as though country specific, and these moves look familiar. But there is a chance that they simply dancified other hieroglyphic arm poses. I'm not sure, I'm not a hieroglyphics expert, but if this is the case, and you don't have a problem with walk like an Egyptian, it's actually rather clever. This isn't here, just be aware. The game has great 2.5D visuals. I believe it's a better attempt at incorporating 3D graphics into a Metroidvania than you'll usually see, especially because it's so solid in feel. Fetishizes the 70s in a lovely way, drained with warm and cold patches, with cool injections of neon, lovely backgrounds and nice angles at times, real cinematic, dimensioned soft quality, as though shown through film reel. I'd say the music is good enough. It can be a bit generic sci-fi, but some of those tracks add to the beauty of the levels, and other times they have more 70s fun with it, and that's lovely. If for no other reason than you see a dance. You see a robot actually do a robot, which is maybe an oldie but a goodie. Unfortunately, they don't attempt to combine the fun and novelty of the 70s with the sci-fi more often. The voice acting is nice. They make them sound like 70s robots. robots, but with hearts. Allow emotion to break through their constricted reality. These robots feel alive. They arguably applied small touches to achieve this effect. May even be the strength of the visuals helped here too. A voice and a flashing light coming from that grey thing walking about. I enjoyed it. Even the stereotypic hippie speak. Maybe I like it too much. Some ways it seems cliched, but yeah, it just thematically works. If the audio can be a bit scratchy and piercing at times, there aren't that many voice actors, so voices do get reused across bots. It also helps that some of the lines are nice, charming at the very least, fitting with the uniqueness, arguably the top seller of the game. The game is unique in general. It's a unique take on the Metroidvania, because you play as a less mobile character, slow and solid in feel, you're hefty with less backtracking. Although some side missions can give some backtracking, I believe the most substantial treks backward were because I experienced forward momentum and forgot to handle the secrets when I was closer by. It's a great quirky thing. The premise, the style, the atmosphere, it all keeps you going. On the maybe side, the story is okay, calm and predictable. There are one or two emotionally satisfying moments in the main plot, and at least the bots are easy to like, and the optional dialogue with them can even be funny. Injects more of the emotional heft, but not everyone is interested in the personality scavenger hunt. Just like in a much earlier Double Fine game that I also reviewed, Stacking, even if this one isn't that difficult. And on the con side, the gameplay is good enough. It can be fun to precisely remove a head with a laser blast, or use a melee weapon to play some rockin' sock'em robots. But it's kind of light when you compare it to the level of style to the game, because movement isn't a focus, there isn't a movement challenge really. Your flying head has to avoid lasers, and some incredibly poorly placed trash compactors, but it's not that tricky. Aiming can be finicky, weirder active use, combat techniques are fairly late game, and secrets are easy to find and short, and there aren't as many things to headland onto as you might have expected when reading what the game was about and assuming parallels to Kirby. But the dances add spice, the style keeps you going, but the game is probably style over substance, ultimately. As much as I love this gaming experience. Come on, play it. Just because these people need help doesn't mean you can't have fun at the same time.
Help me.
Well, I thought it was pretty good.
Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.